The tires of my truck hadn't even stopped spinning before trouble found me. I was halfway out the door, gripping the keys to my dream lake cabin, when a golf cart zoomed up the driveway like a scene out of a bad sitcom. A woman, probably in her 50s, jumped out with a face that looked like it had never smiled in decades. She had the kind of posture that screamed entitlement and a clipboard in hand like she was ready to write a citation for existing. "You there," she barked, pointing at me as if I'd committed a felony by breathing her air. "This land is under HOA authority. You can't be here without board clearance." For a moment, I genuinely thought she was joking. I had just driven cross-country to settle into my newly bought lakefront property. I had the deed, the keys, and a lifetime of dreams wrapped up in this moment. I blinked at her. "I'm sorry, who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my tone polite despite the red flags waving in my mind. "I'm Karen Mitchell," she said, puffing herself up like she was announcing royalty. "President of the Lakeside Homeowners Association. This lot was sold in error. It's still under HOA jurisdiction, and we've initiated steps to reclaim it." My eyebrows shot up. This had to be some misunderstanding. "Ma'am, I bought this place legally. It's not even under HOA governance. The county records are crystal clear." She shook her head and cut me off. "Our board never approved this transaction. You're trespassing on regulated land. You need to pack up and leave before we escalate this." "Escalate it?" I said, dumbfounded. "Lady, I just got here. This is my land. You'll be off it by sundown," she snapped. "I'm calling 911. And with that, she turned her back and whipped out her phone, reporting a trespasser on what she called association property. I stood there, clutching the box of plates I was bringing in, staring at the cabin I'd just bought. The same cabin my grandfather built with his own two hands in the 70s. This land had never, ever been part of any HOA. And yet, here I was, 5 minutes in and already facing a full-scale turf war. 15 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway. Karen ran to it like she was greeting backup in battle. "There he is," she said, pointing at me. "That's the squatter I told you about. He's taken over a property that's under active HOA control." The two deputies, both in their 40s and clearly annoyed, looked at me calmly. One of them, a tall guy with a weathered face, approached me. "Sir, can we see some identification and any documents proving ownership?" "Absolutely," I said, handing over my driver's license and the thick folder of closing paperwork. "This cabin has never been under HOA authority. The deed is clean. County approved. I did my homework before I bought." The deputy flipped through the documents, nodding slowly. Meanwhile, Karen was pacing behind them, arms folded, muttering something about community bylaws and architectural violations. "Ma'am," the second officer asked, "do you have any legal documentation showing this cabin falls under your HOA's jurisdiction?" "Well, not exactly legal documentation," she stammered. "But we maintain the road in front of his lot and we've always considered the outer circle as part of the extended HOA. So it's not recorded with the county," the officer clarified. "No, but we've enforced rules here for years." "Enforced or imposed?" the deputy said, narrowing his eyes. That shut her up. The first deputy handed me back my paperwork. "You're good, sir. Everything checks out. Sorry for the inconvenience." I nodded, feeling a wave of relief. Karen, on the other hand, looked like she'd just swallowed a lemon whole. "You're making a mistake," she said to the officers. "This isn't over." The deputy turned to her and said firmly, "Ma'am, unless you can provide valid legal proof of jurisdiction, this gentleman is fully within his rights. If you file another false report, you could be facing charges." She stormed back to her golf cart and zipped away like a villain retreating to her lair. I watched her disappear down the road and exhaled deeply. So much for a peaceful move-in. I had barely set foot on my own land and already had the HOA president trying to rip it from under me. But I wasn't just some clueless city slicker. I had researched this place for months. I knew the boundaries, the zoning laws, the lack of HOA involvement. What Karen didn't know was that I had come prepared, and I wasn't going anywhere. I walked back to my truck, grabbed the rest of my boxes, and started unpacking. I wasn't going to let someone's fake authority ruin the beginning of what was supposed to be a peaceful new life. But in the back of my mind, I knew this wasn't over. People like Karen don't give up easily. And I had a strong feeling she'd be back, with more tricks up her sleeve. Still, I was ready. I had truth, law, and land on my side. Let the games begin. The next morning, just as I stepped out with a coffee mug in hand to take in the peaceful view of the lake, I heard the unmistakable whine of a golf cart again. And sure enough, Karen was back, this time with 2 more people behind her, a clipboard in hand again, and a look that could curdle milk. Without even a "good morning," she barked, "You were warned. We held an emergency HOA board meeting last night. We've unanimously decided to enforce temporary possession of this lot until ownership disputes are resolved." I nearly laughed. "Karen, your HOA doesn't even legally include this land. That was proven yesterday by law enforcement. You can't enforce squat." "Oh, we'll see," she snapped, motioning to the 2 men behind her, one tall and lean, the other bald and bulky. They looked like off-brand mall security. Both were wearing reflective vests labeled HOA Enforcement Team. They moved toward my front steps like they were about to carry me out. "Stop right there," I said, calmly placing my coffee down and reaching for my phone. "If either of you steps foot on this porch, I'll have the sheriff back out here, this time with trespassing charges." The bald guy hesitated. The tall one glanced at Karen nervously. But she pushed forward. "This entire area falls under our extended buffer zone. The HOA has rules about rental usage, unauthorized modifications, and—" "Karen," I interrupted, "there is no buffer zone in your bylaws. This lot was excluded when your HOA was formed. Check the original plat map." I pulled out a laminated copy from a folder I'd kept handy and unfolded it for them to see. "See this line? That's where your jurisdiction ends. Everything past it? County land. Not HOA." The men stepped back. Karen, now red-faced and sputtering, clearly didn't expect I'd come this prepared. But I had spent months going over the documents before buying this land. My grandfather always warned me. Never buy country land without knowing every inch of it on paper. Still, Karen wasn't done. "This isn't just about paperwork," she hissed. "We have a community standard to uphold. Your property doesn't match the aesthetic of the neighborhood. It brings down our value." I looked around at the nearby properties, cookie-cutter cabins with vinyl siding and plastic flower beds. My cabin, with its rustic timber finish and Real stone chimney, looked like a cozy postcard. Hers? Like a warehouse pretending to be a home. "I'm not here to match your standards," I said. "I'm here to live in peace. And frankly, I don't care about your HOA's plastic roses or regulation birdhouses." She turned sharply. "We'll see how long you stay comfortable when your access is revoked." I narrowed my eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" Karen smirked. "That road you've been using to drive in and out? We maintain that. And starting tomorrow, we're locking the community gate." I couldn't help but grin. "Karen, that might be the dumbest move you've made yet. You'll be cut off," she smiled, turning back to her cart. "Let's see how long your little rebellion lasts without groceries, power, or guests." And then it hit me, she really didn't know. She had no idea that I had secured easement rights through the secondary gravel road on the backside of my property. It was older than the HOA itself and still maintained by the county. Better yet, I had one more surprise she didn't know. I owned the land where the main bridge into the neighborhood stood. A month before closing, I had discovered in the title records that the wooden bridge leading into the lake community was privately owned. Not by the HOA, but by the original developer who had gone bankrupt. That land had sat unsold for years, until I quietly bought it, along with my cabin lot, for a steal. That bridge? The one Karen thought she had control over? It was mine. I watched her disappear down the road, smiling to myself. She thought she was about to choke off my access, but the only thing she'd done was set herself up for a reality check so brutal, it might end her HOA presidency. I had stayed quiet long enough. Now, it was time to make a phone call, contact the county road authority, and post a very specific sign at the bridge entrance. By the time tomorrow rolled around, the gate she was planning to lock would be the one keeping her out. Karen wasn't going to go down quietly. By the next morning, she had plastered the community bulletin board with papers, official-looking ones, designed to intimidate. Notice of violation, they read. Unauthorized use of community resources. Pending fines, $12,500. One was stapled right onto the tree at the corner of my property. I calmly walked over, ripped the paper down, and chuckled. A bluff. An empty threat. But what really amused me was how Karen still didn't understand who she was messing with. She had no legal authority to fine me. HOA jurisdiction, according to their own charter, only applied to parcels that were part of the signed covenant agreement, and my land was never included. In fact, I'd had my lawyer pull the land records months ago. The original developer had carved out 3 private parcels along the lakefront, properties intended to be sold independently, free of HOA rules. Mine was one of them. But while I was busy enjoying my coffee and watching the birds, Karen was busy doing something else, calling 911 again. I saw the sheriff's cruiser long before it rolled to a stop. Same deputy as before, Deputy Clark. A tall, even-tempered man who had the look of someone too tired for HOA drama. He parked at the base of the hill and strolled up to my porch. "Morning again," I said. "She call you or did y'all just miss me?" Clark grinned. "She called. Claimed you were threatening residents with that bridge blockade sign. Wanted you cited for harassment." "Do I look like I'm harassing anyone?" I gestured around. Quiet lake, peaceful morning, me in flannel pajamas and flip-flops. Clark shook his head. "I told her the sign's legal. Told her again you own that land. She insisted on an in-person visit. I offered him a cup of coffee. He accepted. We sat there for a while, listening to the breeze. I used to live in this area," he said. "Before Karen took over, it was quiet. People minded their business. Now I get 2 calls a week from folks here, barking dogs, paint color disputes, Halloween decorations. It's exhausting. Sounds like she's running a dictatorship with bad taste." He laughed. "She once tried to cite someone for leaving Christmas lights up too long. In January." We chatted a bit more before Clark stood up, stretched, and said, "I'll go file the report. Nothing wrong here. Just keep the peace." "No problem, Deputy." Karen must have seen him leave without incident, because 10 minutes later, her cart came screeching down the road. She stopped at the base of my driveway and shouted, "Don't think you've won, mister. You've poisoned this community." I stayed on the porch. "No, Karen. You did that years ago. I just brought the antidote." She slammed the cart into gear and roared away. What she didn't know was that I wasn't done yet. That afternoon, I met with a local attorney, not for revenge, but to ensure full protection. I'd already experienced 2 fake citations, a locked gate, harassment, and now false police calls. It was time to take legal steps. We drafted a cease and desist letter and a formal complaint against the HOA for unlawful interference and defamation. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was shifting. The private community message board was lit up. A thread titled, "Karen has gone too far," was trending. Dozens of posts came in, people complaining about her abuses of power, her intimidation tactics, and how she used HOA dues for personal landscaping projects. One user posted screenshots of budget misuse. Another revealed that Karen had denied multiple permit requests just out of spite. By the end of the day, the petition to remove her had grown to nearly 90 signatures, far more than the number required to call a vote. That evening, I heard a knock at my door. It was the woman with the toddler. Her name was Lacey. She looked nervous. "Hey," she said. "Sorry to bother you. But, would you be willing to speak at the HOA meeting on Friday?" I raised an eyebrow. "You want me to attend the very group trying to get rid of me?" She gave a small smile. "They're not anymore. They want your help." I agreed. Friday night came fast. The clubhouse was packed. Folding chairs lined every wall. Some residents stood near the back. I took a seat at the edge while Karen stood up front with a clipboard and the look of someone hanging on to control by a thread. "This meeting is out of order," she snapped as murmurs grew louder. "There are no grounds for removal. This is mob behavior." An older gentleman, Mr. Prescott, apparently a longtime homeowner, stood up. "Actually, our charter allows for a leadership vote if more than 30% of residents request one. We're past 70. Gasps. Karen fumbled. "This is insane. You people are believing a stranger who just moved in." I stood up, calm and collected. "I didn't ask for any of this. I moved in quietly, legally." Karen tried to lock me out. Called 911, twice. Posted fake violations. All I did was protect what I owned. A woman stood up from the back. "He's not the problem, Karen. You are." Then another voice, "You've bullied this community for years." Karen was unraveling. Her voice shrill now, "He's manipulating you all." I didn't need to say anything else. A vote was held. Ballots dropped into a simple cardboard box on the table. 10 minutes later, the results were read aloud. Out of 96 residents present or accounted for, 83 voted for removal. Karen is officially removed as HOA president. Silence hung in the air. Then applause. Then cheering. Karen stood frozen for a few seconds. Then she threw down her clipboard and stormed out. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stood there quietly as neighbors nodded at me, some shaking my hand. One man even said, "You saved this place." Truthfully, I didn't save anything. I just defended what was mine and stood up when it mattered. As I walked back to my cabin under the starlit sky, I thought about how close I had come to losing my peace, and how much stronger a community can be when people stop letting bullies speak for them. The lake was calm that night. So was I. The next morning felt different. The air was crisp, the birds louder, and the lake, still as glass, reflected the kind of peace I had hoped for when I first moved in. For the first time since arriving, I walked outside without feeling tension pressing against my back. No flyers pinned to trees. No Karen lurking by the mailbox. Just the sweet silence of victory and the start of something new. But while Karen's reign had ended, her mess was far from over. Later that week, I received a manila envelope in the mail, no return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly, Karen's. Inside were copies of the original HOA covenants, highlighted in red marker, with a note scribbled in all caps. "You may have won this round, but this isn't over. I'm taking this to county court." I chuckled and tossed the papers in the fire pit. What Karen didn't know, or chose to ignore, was that I had already preemptively filed my own paperwork with the county. My attorney had submitted a formal complaint backed by notarized land records proving my parcel's exemption from HOA governance. We also included documentation of her harassment, attempted interference with private property, and misuse of emergency services. Within a few days, the county clerk's office responded, confirming my rights and rejecting any claim Karen might attempt to pursue. In fact, I was advised to press charges for HOA misconduct if she continued. But I didn't want a lawsuit. I wanted peace. Surprisingly, most of the community agreed. A week after her removal, the new acting HOA president, Mr. Prescott, paid me a visit. He was a retired Navy vet with silver hair and a handshake that could crush granite. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. I offered him a cold lemonade, and we sat on the porch watching the lake shimmer in the afternoon sun. "You're not what people expected," he said plainly. "A lot of folks here were wary. Thought you were just another outsider looking to stir the pot." I smiled. "I came here to disappear, not dominate." Prescott nodded slowly. "And yet, you ended up leading a quiet revolution." We laughed, but the truth was clear. My arrival had exposed just how deep Karen's influence ran, and how badly it had rotted the sense of community people once cherished. Prescott continued, "We've started cleaning up the mess she left. There are missing funds. Landscaping bills for places that don't even exist. Even payments made to a contractor who turns out to be her nephew." He paused. "I know it's not your responsibility, but, would you consider helping us draft a new HOA charter? One that respects boundaries, limits power, and actually serves the community?" I hadn't expected that. I came to the lake to escape authority, not become part of it. But maybe that's why it made sense. People like Karen thrive where no one watches. Maybe the best way to ensure peace was to quietly guard it. "I'll help," I said. "But I'm not running for anything." Prescott grinned. "Deal." In the weeks that followed, things changed fast. The bridge that once symbolized division became a shared access point, but now with a proper agreement. We posted a friendly sign, "Private property, residents and guests welcome with permission." I even installed a keypad and gave the code to trusted neighbors. The clubhouse got a facelift. Lawn chairs, fresh paint, and a community barbecue pit. Families started showing up again. Lacey and her toddler became regular visitors, her son calling my place, the castle by the water. One evening, at the community bonfire, Lacey sat beside me. "You know," she said, "a lot of us were afraid to speak up before you came." "I didn't do much," I replied. "Just said no when it mattered. That's more than anyone else did in years." She was right. Sometimes the most powerful word you can say is no. No to being bullied. No to lies. No to giving up what's yours just to keep peace. One night, weeks after everything had settled, I found myself walking the edge of the lake. The stars were out, clear and endless. I looked out over the water and thought about my grandfather, who told me stories about places like this. "Find land that gives you peace," he used to say, "and never let anyone take it from you." I didn't know back then how true those words would become. Karen never came back. After the vote, she disappeared from the community like fog in the morning sun. Rumor had it she moved in with her sister in another town. Others said she was trying to join a different HOA, but her reputation followed her. No one wanted that kind of poison again. The cabin became more than just a retreat, it became a symbol. People would wave when they passed the bridge, bring over pie during holidays, and treat it with the kind of respect it deserved. Not because I demanded it, but because they knew what it took to protect it. And through it all, I never once raised my voice. I never threw punches or made threats. I stood quietly, spoke with facts, and defended what was mine. And that was enough. By the end of the summer, the community had changed. Not perfectly. There were still disagreements, about noise, about trash, about who left the dock lights on too late. But those were normal. Human. The fear was gone. The tension had lifted. And in its place? A little peace on a quiet lake, guarded by a man who never asked to be a hero, but refused to be a victim. Sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens or spotlights. Sometimes it shows up with a key, a bridge, and a boundary no bully can cross again.